Have you ever felt like your life is being controlled by someone else, and everything you trusted suddenly collapses in just a few seconds? I used to think I understood my family, my friends, and even myself, until the truth came to light and I realized that sometimes to keep living, you have to face the pain and turn it into strength. This is my story about betrayal, hidden secrets, and how I reclaim my own power amid the chaos. Chapter 1. The beginning, when family vanished. Amidst serenity, I still remember that fateful morning vividly. The sky was clear sunlight, streamed gently through the living room window, and everything seemed normal until I came home. Normal meaning I walked through the door, called out everyone's names just like countless times before. But this time, not a single answer, not a familiar figure in sight. At first, I thought they had gone out somewhere and simply forgot to tell me. I wandered through every room, the living room, the kitchen, my daughter's room. No one. Not a trace to indicate they had ever been there. My heart started racing, a chill crawling up my spine. How could an entire family disappear like this? No notes, no messages, no clues whatsoever. I tried calling each family member on the phone, but every line went straight to voicemail. On top of that, the neighbors watched me with scrutinizing eyes, half concerned, half suspicious, as if they knew something I didn't. I stood in the yard, hands trembling, unable to comprehend what was happening. That mix of helplessness, fear, and emptiness swirled inside me, making me want to scream, but the sound choked in my throat. Looking around, I realized everything else remained unchanged. The cups still sat on the table, toys scattered across the floor, and my daughter's diary lay open on her study desk. But the people themselves were gone, and I knew this was no coincidence. A disturbing premonition stirred within me, as if someone was playing a game with my life. In an instant, memories of minor arguments, of subtle signs from my sister in recent days flashed before me. Strange glances, cryptic remarks, actions I had once ignored. Suddenly, all these fragments assembled into a terrifying picture. It wasn't that they had gone somewhere by chance, but rather, they had left deliberately, and I had not been informed. I collapsed to the floor dizzy. Questions without answers circled relentlessly in my mind. Why? Where did they go? What happened to my daughter? I felt as though I stood before a dark doorway, and stepping through it, I had no idea what awaited me on the other side. That was the moment I realized that all the peace I had once taken for granted could vanish in a single morning. And from that very moment, the journey to find my family, uncover the truth, and confront dark secrets I had never imagined began. Chapter 2. Unusual Signs. The first day after discovering that my entire family had vanished was an unending nightmare. I woke up with my heart still pounding, eyes scanning the empty house. Everything remained exactly as it had the morning before, yet not a single person was there. Their belongings, personal items, even my daughter's coat still hung on its hook, but they themselves had disappeared. I started checking the security cameras. They only recorded ordinary footage, early morning me leaving for work, everything calm and quiet. But there was no scene of anyone leaving the house, no sign of a broken lock, no unusual movement at all. How could they vanish without leaving a trace? I felt as though I had stepped into a parallel world where all logic had collapsed. Driven by the instincts of a father, I began checking every place I could think of: my daughter's school, the nearest hospitals, even the spots her friends frequented. Nothing. Only silence. A silence so intense it was terrifying. I began recalling small words and gestures from before my sister had recently been asking questions far too frequently, her gaze always fixed on me with an indescribable look. At the time I had thought it was mere concern, but now every detail seemed suspicious. In the midst of despair, I received a strange message, just a photo showing a corner of my own living room, slightly disturbed. A message with no explanation, no sender. My heart stopped. Someone had been here they knew what I was searching for, and they were playing a game whose rules I had yet to understand. I tried calling the police, but they could only record the case as a missing persons report and begin the administrative process. No one truly understands the hollow feeling of standing in a house full of memories without seeing a single loved one. I began to wonder if this was a kidnapping. What was the motive? Who would deliberately make an entire family disappear? And was my daughter safe? Then amid the frantic days of searching, I discovered a detail that sent chills down my spine. On my daughter's study desk, there was a diary I clearly remembered never seeing open. The last page had been written the day before they disappeared. The handwriting was shaky yet unmistakably clear. Everything will change. They won't understand, but I will be protected. Who wrote these lines? Why leave them as a cryptic message for me? I began to realize that this was not an ordinary disappearance. Secrets were being hidden, schemes unfolding behind a curtain I'd never known existed. And a part of me told myself if I wanted to find my family, I had to step deep into that darkness, knowing full well that the truth could be far more terrifying than any nightmare I had ever imagined. Chapter 3. Stepping into the darkness. The following days were the most tense I had ever experienced. Every time I looked around the house, I felt as if someone was watching me. Yet when I turned, there was nothing but empty shadows. The strange messages and my daughter's diary were like mysterious puzzle pieces. The more I tried to decipher them, the deeper I sank into a maze with no exit. Then one afternoon, when I returned to the park near our home searching for clues, I saw a figure standing behind the trees. That gaze. I recognized it immediately. My sister. But the strange thing was, she didn't wave, didn't smile, just stood there, looking at me with eyes that were both familiar and alien. My heart pounded. I approached calling her name, but she didn't answer. She remained silent. I decided to confront her and asked about the family, about my daughter. She shook her head, her expression mysterious, and then suddenly pulled out a small bag. Inside was an item, my daughter's favorite toy, something only she and I knew about. She handed it to me and said coldly, "She'll be okay. But not if you keep going like this." Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. Was she warning me or testing me? I no longer knew whom to trust, and all reason seemed to slam against an invisible wall. But the instincts of a father urged me forward. I had to do whatever it took to find my child. While struggling with myself, I noticed a detail I had previously overlooked. My sister's phone was always switched off, yet I saw a message blinking on the screen from an unknown number. Only 2 words, "Meet me." I knew this was the only clue to approach the truth. That evening, I went to the meeting location, an old warehouse hidden among narrow streets. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest when I saw the family. They were all there, but not in normal condition. They were surrounded by strange objects, notes with half-mysterious writings. I tried calling to them, but they just stared at me, eyes full of fear, yet carrying something, almost hypnotized. My sister stepped forward among us. This time she smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "You're heading in the right direction," she said. "But to save them, you must understand why this happened. And there are truths you won't want to know." My heart skipped a beat. I understood then the real battle was not just finding my family. This was a psychological game where every decision I made could lead to disaster. And most importantly, I began to realize that there was a mastermind behind it all. Someone I had never imagined could be an adversary. Chapter 4. The Unveiling Mystery. I stood there in the cold warehouse trying to grasp every detail. My sister was still smiling, but now that smile felt more like a warning than a sign of closeness. The dim light from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling cast shadows over the notes plastered across the walls, turning the space into a psychological maze. She began to tell a story I never could have imagined. She said that after I'd left, she experienced a trauma I had never known about. She felt abandoned, and gradually in her mind, the child, my daughter, was no longer just my niece, but the embodiment of a part of her memory she believed was lost. I froze. She thought my daughter was... Before I could form the thought fully, she stepped closer, raised her hand, and whispered, "You don't understand. She has a chance to fix everything that went wrong." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but anger surged inside me. How could she think that holding my child was a way to fix anything? I stepped forward, attempting to regain control, but she was faster than I expected. She turned and pressed a button on her phone. Instantly, the windows of the warehouse lit up, displaying images from security cameras I had never seen. I saw my family. They were unharmed but clearly being watched, their eyes staring directly at the screens, filled with panic and fear. She turned back to me, her voice brimming with authority. "You want to save them? Then listen. This is not as simple as you think. There are secrets you've hidden, choices you thought were right, and now they're coming back to face you." I felt my heart stop. Memories of the times I ignored warnings of mistakes I had thought harmless flashed vividly in my mind. Every step I took was monitored, every decision became part of her game. And then the ultimate twist appeared. She pulled out an old photograph of me with my parents. But in that photo was a detail only I could recognize, a truth I had tried to forget, a mistake I had once dismissed as trivial. She whispered, "You've hidden this for years, and now it's back. She isn't just your niece. She's the last chance to make it right." My heart pounded fiercely. This was no longer just a simple search for my daughter. This was a battle between past and present, between buried secrets, and a truth I was not yet ready to face. And most importantly, I realized that if I wanted to save my family, I would not only have to confront my sister, but also confront myself. I drew in a deep breath, feeling cold sweat trickle down my spine. This game had only just begun, but I knew one thing for certain this time: I could not afford to lose. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. I knew I had no other choice. Every second that passed, my family remained under surveillance, and I had to act before everything spiraled out of control. My sister stood before me, her gaze cold as if she had planned every move in advance. I felt as though I was facing a seasoned warrior, not a relative, but a true adversary. "Do you really think you can just walk in here and take everything back?" she asked, her voice dripping with challenge. "You've deceived, you've hidden, and now it's time to pay." I didn't answer. I stared straight into her eyes. Every memory of the times I ignored warnings, every seemingly harmless wrong choice came alive. I realized I had unknowingly lit the spark for all that was unfolding. But now I could not allow the past to control the present. She stepped closer, and I recognized what I had feared. She had prepared everything, not just to hold my child, but to force me to confront the mistakes I had long buried. A small table was pushed between us, covered with documents, old photos, and my journal. She flipped to a page, pointing at a line I had written long ago, her voice chewing every word. "You really thought you could keep this secret forever." My heart pounded. This was no longer a power game. This was a battle between truth and concealment, between me and the family member I had trusted most. But I was no ordinary opponent either. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "You're wrong," I said, my voice steady. "She is my child, and I will not let you use any reason to separate me from my family." She smiled a smile both arrogant and terrifying. "We'll see who comes out on top." She pulled out another phone, displaying an image of my daughter crying in her crib, and I realized I had only one chance left to save her. In that instant, I recalled every skill, every ounce of intellect and determination I had ever possessed. I had to think fast. I began asking questions, probing for weaknesses in her plan, navigating step by step, while keeping calm as my heart threatened to shatter. Then the first twist appeared. One of the notes on the wall, which I had assumed was harmless, was actually the key. It revealed a flaw in the surveillance system she believed was flawless. I seized the opportunity, immediately speaking to her with a calm yet sharp tone. "You overlooked something, and that's my chance." She paused, frowning, and I felt a crack in the armor of her seemingly invincible confidence. I moved quickly, grabbing her phone, redirecting the cameras, and in an instant the images of my family were freed from her control. She flinched, and I realized I had regained the upper hand. But this was far from over. She remained a dangerous adversary, and I knew that the real battle had only just begun. I needed a strategy not only to save my daughter, but to force her to face the truth, and ultimately to end this in a way I would not regret. Chapter 6. The Decisive Battle. I knew this moment would decide everything. My sister stood there still confident, but something had shifted. Her gaze was no longer completely cold. I sensed doubt creeping in. This was the moment I had to turn everything against her, while simultaneously protecting my daughter, protecting my family from irreparable harm. I stepped forward, calm but resolute, and began recounting everything I knew, the times she had deliberately manipulated the evidence documenting her actions, even the occasions she had schemed to seize power within the family. I did not emphasize these to humiliate her, but to force the truth into the open, leaving her no path but to face it. She flinched. I saw the cracks in her once unshakable confidence slowly appear. And then the ultimate twist emerged. While I thought I was being watched, it was she who was truly afraid. A message appeared on my phone from someone she trusted, something she apparently hadn't anticipated, unaware that I had prepared a defensive strategy of my own. I smirked, emphasizing, "You've forgotten one basic thing. Everyone has limits, and so do I. But I know how to turn strength into control." She stood silently, saying nothing. I stepped closer, looking her squarely in the eyes. "It's over. She will not leave me, and this family will not be destroyed by personal schemes." At that moment, she lowered the phone, bowed her head, and for the first time I saw her fatigue, her disappointment, and her true self, no longer hidden behind a mask of confidence. Only the fear of exposure remained. I knew this victory did not come from strength or violence, but from perseverance, careful observation, and understanding the psychology of my opponent. My daughter cried, and I rushed to hold her, feeling as if the entire world exhaled with me. My sister stood silently, but I knew she realized that all plots, all control had collapsed. I did not celebrate, did not shout, did not gloat. I simply stood there holding my daughter, savoring the first sense of peace after months of tension. My sister turned away without a word, but her gaze was no longer threatening. Instead, it carried recognition. I could not be subdued, and my family was sacred. And in that moment, I realized true victory is not when others bow down, but when you can protect what matters most, while retaining yourself and your dignity. My daughter was safe, my family reunited, and I knew from this point forward, no one could ever threaten us again. Chapter 7. Healing and Light. After darkness. After that battle, nothing immediately returned to normal. I had thought that victory would make everything easy, but the truth was that both my soul and my daughter's needed time to heal. In those first nights, I would still wake up in the middle of the night, listening to every small sound, afraid my sister might return, afraid that everything was only temporary. But then I realized something important. Strength does not come from controlling others, but from controlling oneself. I began slow mornings, breathing deeply, talking to my daughter with all the love and safety I could provide. Each passing day, I witnessed changes in her, the smiles, the laughter, the curious, innocent eyes. It was the greatest healing balm. I also learned to forgive, not for my sister, but for myself. Forgiveness to liberate, to no longer carry the burden of anger and hatred. When I forgave myself for the fear, doubt, and pain I had experienced, I truly felt strong again. My family gradually stabilized. Relationships that had been damaged began to mend, not by forgetting, but through understanding and sincerity. Each time I watched my daughter sleep peacefully, I whispered to myself, "We have weathered the storm, and from now on, nothing can take our happiness away." I began writing down memories and experiences as a way to preserve strength and lessons learned. I realized that suffering is not the end, but a part of the journey to reclaim the light. And when that light emerged, I saw that I was not just a mother, a daughter, a sister, but also a powerful, resilient woman who could rise after every challenge. My sister was no longer a threat, but had become a lesson in vigilance and awareness. I did not hate, I did not resent, but I no longer allowed her to interfere in my life. I reminded myself true power is when you can protect yourself and those you love while keeping your heart pure. And in that peaceful moment, holding my daughter and looking out the window at the sunlight streaming in, I knew that we had survived, we had won, and most importantly, we had found ourselves again. Life is not perfect, but I had found light in the darkness. From that point on, each day became a new opportunity to love, to be strong, and to live fully. Chapter 8. Rebuilding and New Strength. After the dark days, I began to feel a new strength rising within me. I was no longer consumed by fear or anxiety about the past. Instead, I felt ready to face anything more confident, and most importantly, I knew my own worth. I started planning for the future, not just for myself, but for my daughter, a life full, peaceful, and happy. I sought opportunities to grow professionally, to rebuild old relationships I had previously neglected, and to create a safe environment for her to grow up in. Every small step brought joy. I celebrated each achievement, whether it was completing a work project or simply creating a warm, laughter-filled dinner for my daughter. The moments that once seemed ordinary became more precious than ever. Perhaps the greatest lesson I learned was how to set boundaries for myself. I would not allow anyone to invade my private life, nor let the ghosts of the past overshadow the present. From now on, every decision would be made with dignity and reason, not out of fear or external pressure. And through this process, I realized something essential. True strength is not about pushing away all enemies, but about mastering your own mind and emotions. When you can stand firm, even in the face of a storm, that is when you are truly free. I began sharing my story not to expose my pain, but to spread strength and hope. Every time I saw someone smile because of my journey, I knew that everything I had endured was not in vain. On the contrary, it became a source of inspiration, proof that anyone can find the light after darkness. And then, one peaceful afternoon, as my daughter ran and played in the yard, I sat by the window watching the last rays of sunlight. I felt a profound sense of satisfaction, a feeling that all the effort, all the pain and trials had ultimately led me here to a place where I could stand tall, free, and whole. Chapter 9. The Perfect Ending. The final months of this journey taught me an important lesson. Not everything unfolds the way we want, but we can always control how we respond. I learned to turn pain into strength, failures into lessons, and most importantly, to use the past as a foundation for a better future. One morning, as I was preparing breakfast for my daughter, the phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, my heart skipped a beat. It was the person I'd once considered the greatest threat in my life. But instead of fear or anger, I simply smiled. This time, I was calm and confident. I listened as they spoke, heard their belated apologies and explanations that could not change the past. And for the first time, I realized I no longer needed them to feel whole. Instead, I held peace in my heart, joy with my daughter, and a sense of complete freedom. I learned to forgive, not for them, but to liberate myself. All the darkness, all the resentment and worries I'd carried for so long now dissolved. I told myself, this life is mine, and I deserve to live it fully. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected opportunity, a major career project that allowed me to work close to home and spend more time with my daughter. I embraced it with excitement because now I knew I had the strength to overcome any challenge. And the best part, I had learned to confidently say no to anything that wasn't good for me, and yes to every chance to grow and be happy. On another afternoon, as my daughter played in the yard, I stood by the window, watching the sunlight streaming through the trees. I smiled, not a fleeting smile of simple joy, but a full smile of completeness, of a woman who had weathered the storm and now stood tall with all her power and freedom. My story isn't just about pain or betrayal. It is a story of rebirth, of reclaiming oneself, and knowing that you deserve happiness no matter what has passed. And finally, as my daughter ran to hug me, I knew that everything I had endured those dark days, those difficult decisions, those silent battles had led to this moment. Peace, freedom, and true happiness. And I smiled knowing that this was not the end, but a new beginning, a life I fully controlled, a life I was proud to call my own. And that's the whole story. A story where pain is no longer a burden, but a weapon I use to protect myself and affirm my own worth. There are things you cannot change, but the way you respond to them shapes your future. I have found the light after darkness, and if you are struggling with wounds of your own, remember that the greatest power lies in your own hands. Thank you for listening to my story, and always believe in your own strength.